Welcome everyone to this Big Talk, a podcast powered by The Big Well. As a media, our primary mission is to bridge this gap between the crypto space and the traditional world, and ultimately building trust in a still too often trustless world. And today I'm very pleased to host RAND Indy, CEO of Zama. Hello RAND, how are you?
Hey, nice to meet you guys.
A company, so Zama is a company specialized in the design of privacy solutions. So we're gonna, of course, talking about this during this podcast, and we will obviously discuss this in a report, a big report we're gonna dedicate on privacy on the big world. So be a subscriber because that's gonna be just for our subscribers. So if you have any question, come in DM in Twitter or to their co-founder like Raphael Bloch or Gregory Raymond. So very, very pleased to have you soon as a subscriber in the community as a big well. But right now, it's time to discuss with you, RAND. My first question will be very simple. Can you just explain what precisely Zama is doing?
Sure. So Zama is a company building open source technologies around something called homomorphic encryption. The idea of homomorphic encryption, or FHE for short, is that you can compute on encrypted data without actually having to decrypt it first. So let's imagine for a second that you're a user of a blockchain product. Right now, all the data you're putting in your transaction and on-chain is visible to everyone. So for example, when you make a token transfer, your balance is visible to everyone, the amount you're sending is visible to everyone. So there is no confidentiality in those applications. With homomorphic encryption, you could encrypt your transaction amount, your balance on chain would be encrypted, but because you can compute on it, the validators can still run the smart contracts, can still basically do everything they're supposed to do without ever seeing the actual data they're computing on. And so from your perspective as a user, nothing changes. You're basically just sending money to someone or doing whatever you want to do on chain. But now the data is encrypted when you send it and during processing on chain. So it's basically encrypted end to end. So you can think of FHE as HTTPS for blockchain, effectively.
Okay, very interesting. So practically how it's working, I'm going to send a transaction through a public blockchain, and what's happening precisely?
So the way it works is, on your side, when you submit your transaction, you first need to encrypt the data you want to include in the transaction. So taking again the example of the token that you want to send, you're encrypting the amount that you want to send. Then once the transaction is processed by validators, they run the same kind of computation that they would if the data was not encrypted. So they would, subtract the amount from your balance, and then they would add it to the balance of the other person. They would also check that you have enough funds to make the transfer. So all of that, the logic of the contract is pretty much the same as if the data was not encrypted, but instead of operating on the regular data, it's operating on the encrypted data. So if you look at the actual smart contract Solidity code, it just looks like Solidity code. All the magic basically happens at the cryptography math level. And without getting to too much detail, the way the math works is, imagine you've got number A, okay? What you will do is you'll basically add a huge random number on top. So if I give you this big random number, you actually don't know what was the original value that I just hide with this, big number. But just because you added a big random number on top of it doesn't prevent you from potentially adding two such numbers together and then eventually subtracting this big number you had in the beginning. So that's basically how the encryption-decryption works. You're effectively just flooding the original data with a bunch of random data on top.
I see, very clear. But I would say one of the main obstacles of the arrival of the major financial institution on blockchain, public, precisely, is the lack of privacy. So is the transparency of a public blockchain compatible with, I would say, with the confidentiality needs of traditional financial institution? Because as a user of a public blockchain, of course, it's very random, to check on Etherscan, for example, how many tokens there is on this address, how many transactions, what kind of transaction, what kind of protocol this user is using. So is it compatible with public blockchain? And my second question attached to it is where we stand about the technology, the homomorphic encryption. Just you describe in for the first question.
So it is definitely already usable for big financial institutions. When you think about confidentiality on a blockchain, there are two things that you want to hide. There is the actual data. So for example, your token balance and the amount you're sending. And then there is the metadata. So the address from which you sent the tokens, right? So that the transaction trace itself. Traditionally, when people think about privacy on a blockchain, they think about anonymizing the trace of the transaction, but the data on chain is still public, right? So you can tell that someone received 100 tokens, you just don't know who sent it to them. This is typically what happened with Tornado Cash, right? And this is exactly what I would say the authorities hate, because they're not able to verify the origin of the funds that were just sent, right? FHE is very different. FHE doesn't hide the transaction itself. It hides the content of the transaction, the actual data that's on chain. So, if you think of Tornado Cash like Tor, where you're basically hiding your IP address, but you're accessing public content, then FHE is more like Signal. You're using a public network that people can see you're using, but the content is encrypted. So in the case of Signal, the messages are encrypted. In the case of FHE, the on-chain data is encrypted. And that's much better because you can retain the traceability element of blockchain, which gives you, a verifiability that gives you, just knowing what's going on, with the confidentiality of not disclosing what you actually did on chain. So in the case, again, of like a big financial institution, what that means is, sure, you can tell that they hold USDC, but you don't know how much. You don't know the identity of the people that are holding it. You don't know how much each of the wallets are owning. The only thing you know is that, XYZ bank has some USDC on chain. Okay, so what, right?
And can we say that this is the biggest problem for the adoption, the adoption right now we are seeing?
So.
Or
Yeah, I think so. And even from a regulatory perspective, you're not allowed to disclose this data for privacy reasons. So it's not just that, they don't want to do it for product reasons. It's that there are also some regulatory obligations to keep some data secret. But now, we talk a lot about those tokens, but these are just some examples of what you can do. Another big one is identity. Today, if you want to use a DeFi product in a compliant way, there isn't really a way to do that, right? You can maybe do some KYC off-chain and get your address whitelisted, but there is no way for the DeFi protocol to do this verification on-chain. With a homomorphic encryption, you could have your identity on-chain encrypted, so your age, how much money you're making, with your salary, your nationality, these would just be encrypted data on-chain. And when a DeFi protocol wants to verify that, for example, you're not American, all you have to do is make an encrypted claim against your encrypted identity that you're not American. So your identity becomes a composable primitive of the DeFi application. And so that's huge when you think about it, because when you think about compliance, when you think about all of these things, the ability to have composable identities is absolutely essential to the mix.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you are almost the only one working on the homomorphic encryption. It is not a problem.
Not the only one, but the only one that has something that works.
Okay. But can you just, for example, there is the ZK proof. Can you just describe for you why is it the best technology for you? And because there is like Monero, Zcash, the ZK proof. Why homomorphic encryption is the best according to you?
So two reasons. First, FHE doesn't require learning some new cryptography or language. if you've ever tried to use ZK for a complex application, you'll realize that it's very difficult to actually build, right? FHE, we've integrated directly into Solidity so that you just have to write Solidity code. All of the logic is in the smart contract as Solidity code. So let's, for example, imagine that you want to give someone else visibility on your balance. You just write some Solidity code to do that. There is nothing that's happening outside of the smart contract. So that's number one, the ability to just use Solidity smart contracts. The second thing is ZK doesn't allow you to have composability on the secret state, because ZK is not a technology for confidential computing. It's a technology for verifying that you've done some computation already. So if you want to prove that you're over 18, then sure, your identity could be in your wallet and you could do a ZK proof that you're over 18, but the only thing you can do on chain is verify that proof. You cannot use this information as part of another application where this would become like an input parameter, right? And the lack of composability on chain in ZK is really what FHE is solving. So a different way to say it is, if you only care about privacy with regards to your own data that's off-chain, then ZK is great. If you want composability on the encrypted data on-chain, then that's where FHE comes in.
And regarding the development of this technology, when we can expect to see it working on the market on directly blockchain or adopted by so many financial institutions?
It's a work in progress. So right now we have 10 protocols integrating FHE.
Which one? Can we know?
I can tell you those that are public. So Shiba is one of them.
Okay.
So Shiba is basically now using FHE for their L2 ecosystem.
Okay.
So you might be asking, why does a meme coin needs confidentiality?
Yes.
Well, it's actually very clever, because what the Shiba guys figured is that they created a brand, right? And the same way that Disney has Mickey Mouse, Shiba has the Shiba dog. And now they're building an entire universe around that. And that universe might include some games where you want some of the gameplay to be on-chain confidentially. It might include, some tokens that you want to keep confidential. There is a metaverse, so maybe you want to keep your land, confidential, things like that. So FHE here is not used for, financial applications. It's used to build stuff that just couldn't be built otherwise. So that's one example. By the way, that's a great collector hat. It's signed by the founders of Shiba. So, technically not the founder, the lead devs, sorry.
Okay.
Another one is Phoenix, which is basically building FHE rollups. So if you want to build, launch a rollup with FHE, you can do that. Inco is another one, which is launching an FHE L1. And Zama itself is also launching very soon what we call FHE coprocessors.
Okay.
So they're basically ways to have FHE applications on top of non-FHE enabled chains. So you'll be able to deploy FHE contracts on Ethereum, on Base, on Solana, on any of those ecosystems. So really, for us at this point, it's no longer a question of infrastructure. Between Zama, Phoenix, Inco, Shiba, and all of these guys, there is more than enough people building good infrastructure to run FHE applications. The goal now is for developers to build apps on top of these things.
Interesting.
That's really the game.
And what do you mean by building apps on top of your technology?
For example, there is a company we're working with that's currently building Venmo on chain.
Yes.
For those who don't know Venmo was a payment app where you would send your friends some money.
So it's like PayPal or
exactly.
like player like that.
But see, the thing about Venmo is that you could not see how much money you were sending to your friends, but you could see that you sent money to a friend. So the transaction was visible, but not the content. And that's exactly what FHE enables to do in a blockchain. You can tell that RAND sent money to someone else, but you don't know how much. So just building Venmo on chain, simple example, but wasn't possible without FHE. There's another company that's currently building a data marketplace on chain as well, that enables people to basically sell their data by having their encrypted data on chain for people to use, for example, for training AI models. There are a couple of companies using FHE for on-chain machine learning. to keep the user input secrets. So it's actually growing really, really, really fast right now. It's pretty incredible. In fact, since we launched our FHEVM product a year ago, the size of the FHE ecosystem built on top of our technology is now over $1 billion.
Okay, congratulations.
So, well, I mean, let's wait for them to go to mainnet and for that to be 100 billion, and then we can talk about congratulations. But you get the idea. Is even before going to mainnet, FHE is already $1 billion ecosystem. I mean, how many times in the history of blockchain have we had the opportunity to create something completely new like that, right? It happened with ZK the last time. It happened with Ethereum and smart contracts before that. It happened with Bitcoin before that. So, like this is kind of like the fourth big, I would say, new technology that is being enabled on chain.
Ran, you recently raised 73 million in a Series A funding. What are you prioritize for the following months and I would say in the following years, maybe with all of this amount of money?
So the first thing is getting our partners who are building infrastructure into mainnet early 2025.
Okay.
So Q1, Q2 2025.
Early 2025. Okay.
Yeah, early 2025, you're going to have the first official FHE mainnets going live. So that's number one. The second thing, which I mentioned earlier, is we want to get developers to build with FHE. Because it's great to have blockchains that you can run this on, but it's even better if you've got applications you can use, right?
Yes. It
sounds obvious, but
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Okay.
Right. I mean, look. Today in blockchain, we have more L1s and L2s than we have apps, which is crazy when you think about it. So we have to shift that around. And so on FHE, if you're a developer, you should start building with FHE. So that's really going to be our goal. Our goal is just to grow the FHE ecosystem and to have as many people build applications and as many users use those applications.
Okay. And when you are saying you want to attract like builders overall, what it will be? It will be a platform. It will be permissionless to build on this. So how it's going to work? Because recently we are seeing that there is a Morpho, for example, there is Uniswap, there is a trend like okay, we are launching a platform, so that's perfectly the V4 for Uniswap, and you are allowed, if you are an institution or if you are a builder, you are allowed to build on this. Yeah. So it will be the same principle with Zama.
Yeah. I mean, whether you decide to build on one of the, on one of our partners' chain, or whether you want to build on Zama's co-processors, as the developer, you just build a smart contract, deploy it, and then that's it.
Okay, and it will be completely permissionless to build on this.
Yeah, it's completely permissionless. Zama might charge a fee.
Okay.
Right? I mean, we're a company. We have to make money at some point.
No, of course. But it will be my next question. What's your business model currently? You are, of course, you are a tech company. You raise money, but in the future, or I would say in a perfect world, what will be the business model for Zama?
So everything we do is open source, without exception.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah. Every single line of code is open source. And that's important because if it's not open source, you shouldn't trust it, period, right? Verify, don't trust. That's like basis number one. But everything we open source, we also hold patents on. So we basically created technology, patented it, and then made it open source. So our open source license effectively says, use it as much as you want for free, for personal use, for prototyping, for things like that. But if you want to use it commercially, then you should basically get a license for the patents that are in the open source code.
Yes.
Right? And the way you do that is either you get a license and you integrate our technology into your own blockchain, in which case you would get paid in tokens. Or if you want to use our coprocessor, it's basically a hosted service. So as long as you pay the fees for using the service, you can use our technology. Right?
Okay.
So it's a super basic model, very similar to how MongoDB and some of those open source companies did it before. There's an open source code with a commercial license on top that we monetize through either services or self-managed licenses.
And in all of this, what will be the utility of your token?
We don't have a token.
But are you planning to launch a token, to use it or like an incentive for builders or?
We don't have to. So our partners are launching tokens, right? All
Okay.
those blockchains being built. If Zama does a token, it might be for one of its hosted services, but we haven't made a decision on that yet.
Okay.
But even if we did do a token, I think that we would want to do it in a old-fashioned way, like do like a token auction or something like that,
Okay.
because we don't
And
need
what
the
do you
money.
mean? What do you mean by old-fashioned?
Well, so there's a bit of a conundrum today in blockchain that in order for companies to build the chain and launch the token, they have to raise money. And so you end up raising a ton of money before the token is even launched. And therefore, the token FDV, the valuation, is very high on the day
Yes.
that you release the token. It's not that people want to do that because they're not being nice. It's just that they had to raise the money in order to actually launch the token. So at some point, it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing, right? But if you think about the way that people used to do it, they used to launch products very early on and effectively do a public sale of the token, right? Or an auction type of sale of the token. So, you would be able to get into those tokens pretty cheap compared to today's TGE standards, right? So considering that Zama doesn't need money, we have plenty of money, right? Our investors
Right now, yes.
invested in a company as equity, right? Then if at some point in the future we do decide to do a token, which again, we haven't decided to do, but if we did, then I would want to do it in a way that is accessible for people in our ecosystem.
Yeah.
Basically, it's simple. Like, I think, if Zama doesn't have to raise money with the token, we shouldn't sell it too expensive. It's that simple.
I hope so. There is a question around your technology. Is it scalable right now? Because it generates a lot of more calculation, like AI, or that's very, very difficult to scale with those technologies. So, how can we solve this problem of scalability?
So when we started a company 4 years ago, there were 3 issues with FHE. First, it was too slow. Second, it was very difficult to use if you were not a cryptographer yourself. And third, you could only use it for very basic applications. So we already solved the usability problem. You can now just write Solidity code, and then we take care of everything else. So you don't have to know cryptography. That's done. We've solved the applicability issue. You can use FHE for machine learning, for blockchain smart contracts. There is no longer a limitation in what you can do with FHE. And finally, in terms of performance, we are 100 times faster than when we started the company. And I'll give you an idea of like how fast FHE is growing. The first time we created and tested the FHE VM, we could do about 0.2 transactions per second.
Okay.
A year later, we could do 5 TPS. Our latest internal benchmarks show that we can do 20 TPS. We're expecting that on GPU and with some things we're going to be releasing in the next few months, by summer 2025, we should be able to get between 50 and 100 TPS on GPU. Nobody currently uses that much capacity, right? And that's assuming one chain. But if you have like this roll-up kind of vision, if every single FHE roll-up has 100 TPS, then scalability is no longer an issue. So you see, I think what people misunderstand is, and that's a very common misunderstanding in technology, people are not very good at anticipating exponential growth, right?
Yeah, especially in crypto, yeah.
Yeah, and FHE for a long time was, it's slow, okay, it's a little bit better, but still too slow, still too slow, still too slow. What people didn't realize is that FHE is driven by Moore's law. It gets faster. It basically gets 2 to 5 times faster every year, right? So in the beginning, it's still very slow, but all of a sudden, it goes very fast. And we are now at this inflection point. So FHE is going to look like a technology that overnight started to work because people didn't pay attention to the slow exponential curve that has been going on since we started the company, right? And that for me is really the beautiful thing is if you've got Moore's law on your side, then the question is not whether it's going to scale. The question is, how fast are you going to get there?
Yeah, but yes, that's a question right now. I mean, it's I'm thinking about this when I'm saying scalability. It's scalability is a question of TPS.
And as I said,
yes,
2021, 2022, we said we're going to be building an FHEVM. 2023, we released the first demo testnet at ECC. 2024, that was already 10 times faster. And 2025 is going to be another 10 times faster. It's 10 times faster every year.
okay.
Do you realize that? It means that in 2 to 5 years, we can do 1,000 TPS. We can do Solana encrypted end-to-end. So here's the question. If you can support as much capacity as blockchains currently do, then FHE becomes a default at some point, right? FHE is no longer something that you use when you need it. I think in 5 years, FHE will be used by default in every single blockchain application because it will be fast enough. So why not use it? Why not have a default confidentiality? And that's what I mean when I say HTTPS for blockchain. So we call that HTTPZ, by the way, but you get the idea.
you are mostly right now on the EVM ecosystem, so the Ethereum ecosystem. Or
there's no technical reason for that. It's purely that from a go-to-market perspective, most of the liquidity is still on EVM ecosystems. Not just Ethereum, but if you look at EVM overall, it's a pretty big ecosystem, right? So we're starting with that, but of course, very quickly we want to support Solana and Ton. So that's going to be on the roadmap as well.
So that's your Solana and Ton. That's your next target.
Yeah,
in terms
we
of
go where the users are, right?
Okay. And you mentioned a little bit that in the previous question, but what's the problem right now regarding the integration of Ton or Solana in your technology? It's a question of time. It's a question of technology.
Prioritization of engineering resources.
Okay.
Right. We don't have an infinite number of people. We do have a lot of people. Actually, we're the largest cryptography team in all of blockchain, I would say, at this point.
So interesting, Ron. Can you provide for us an overview of Zama? How many clients do you have? Maybe how much money are you making right now? Your employees. So what is Zama? Currently.
Well, there's some stuff we're going to be announcing in 2025, so I'm going to hold off on talking about those.
Okay.
We could talk about money and customers, but I think, I've always basically felt that the only time it's worked talking about revenue and customers is when you have a big announcement.
Okay.
Right.
I'm curious. This is just between you and me, so you can say it safely. Sure.
Once we can officially talk about it, we'll talk about it.
Okay.
I promise. Right.
Okay.
And we'll call you. We'll let you know. In the meantime, we're going to have a bunch of announcements, but I think those big, I would say, customer or revenue announcements will be in 2025. We have to wait until our customers go to mainnet before we can make actual claims, right?
Okay.
After all, we get paid in tokens.
Of course, yeah.
Right. But putting that aside, so talking about the team, so my background is machine learning, right? I did a PhD in AI in 2007 when I was 21. I built one of the first AI companies that I sold in 2019. And my co-founder, Pascal Payet, is one of the inventors of homomorphic encryption. He has a scheme to his name called the Payet scheme. He's a kind of co-founder. It's like if I told you I'm launching a blockchain with Vitalik as my co-founder. Like he's that kind of guy in homomorphic encryption. So he brought on board some of the best cryptographers on the planet. Nigel Smart, Marc Joie, all of these guys, which are like top of their game, are working at Zama right now. So out of 75 employees that we have, half of them are cryptography researcher and engineers and have PhDs. So we have more people doing research in homomorphic encryption than any company in the world right now, right? So I think, when I started Zama in the beginning, I told my investors, I'm like, guys, I'm going to be straight upfront with you. we're not going to be making money for at least 3 to 4 years because we need to get this technology to work first. So our strategy from day one was hire the best researchers on the planet, build a kind of OpenAI team for FHE, effectively, right? Focus on open source and developer adoption. And once the technology is good enough, start commercializing it. That's exactly what we did. We started commercializing after 3 years, started making deals on deals. And 2025, they go to mainnet. So
that's a good roadmap.
It worked according to plan. I'm still quite amazed at how I could predict when we're going to figure it out. But that's the thing about deep tech companies. There's an incompressible amount of research time needed to unlock the market, right? And when you do that, it grows very fast. So for a few years, you're like, oh, it doesn't work, it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Oh, it works. Boom. Then it goes very quickly. And I think you can see it, right? You can feel that there is momentum around FHE all of a sudden. That's because it started working a year ago.
I wish you I wish you success and to have this roadmap. Regarding the regulation, for example, if there is I would say a problem, and the regulator wants to see this transaction or this transaction, how it's going to work? You are just a pure technology provider, or how it's working?
Zama doesn't have the ability to decrypt anything. Okay. So Zama doesn't hold any decryption key. We the only thing we can do is we provide the technology, or we do some computation for you, like AWS would, right?
Okay.
But there is no way for us as a company ever to see the data that's encrypted. That's not possible. Breaking homomorphic encryption would mean breaking post-quantum cryptography. So, I think we have bigger problems if that happens effectively.
Okay.
But in terms of compliance and regulation, that's one of the very nice things about FHE is that you can bake in the compliance rules in the smart contract of the application itself. So for example, you could require that a user provides an encrypted identity proving they're not American. And you could, in the smart contract, authorize the US regulator to decrypt the transactions of the US people who use a protocol. Right?
Okay.
It's just Solidity code. I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just saying you could do that. Now, contrast that to ZK. ZK can be compliant, but every end user has to do it. There is no way with ZK for the application to be compliant itself. The user has to do the effort. FHE enables the application to be compliant, which I think is much more powerful when you think about it, because the end user doesn't have to do anything.
But I mean, are you not, I would say, afraid to be in the same position as some people from Tornado Cash, for example? Because I'm asking the question because that's a very good tool for privacy, Tornado Cash. But we saw how it ends, So I'm very curious, if you have the ability.
They're completely different.
Okay.
Tornado Cash was about hiding your identity. Governments hate when they cannot trace back the people who make transactions. Because as long as they can trace you back, they can always find that on-ramp at some point. So they can always figure out someone who knows you, who sent you the money or something. So they know who to go and knock on the door of, right? With FHE, you're not hiding the identity. You're hiding the data. So they know that RAND made the transaction.
I see. Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And so the ability to have traceability and accountability of on-chain transaction is the only thing governments want.
Okay.
Right? Because they know who to go and ask for the data.
Okay.
Right?
So
that's a big difference, right? And that's what I meant earlier when I said that, Tornado Cash is like Tor. You're anonymizing the identity of people accessing public content. And governments hate that. FHE is like Signal. You're using a public traceable infrastructure to exchange encrypted data. That's FHE.
Okay, very clear. Currently, with Shiba, what kind of client do you have? If we can have an overview of your, I would say, the landscape of your clients currently.
Yeah, so we have 3 types of companies we work with. We've got Web3 infrastructure companies. So typically building L1, L2s with FH integrated into it, Shiba being one of those ecosystems.
Yes.
On the other side, we're also working with traditional financial institutions. So they're not necessarily looking to deploy on a public blockchain, but they want to use blockchain for trading between them in a way that wouldn't reveal each other's positions. Easy, right? So basically, think about replacing the Swift network with a blockchain, but still retaining confidentiality with of what you basically have on the network, right? Which was not possible today when you think about it, right? That's the first time this is possible. So that's a big use case. So tokenization of assets on institutional blockchains, right? This is enabled by FHE. And the third type of companies are people building applications, right? And whether those applications are running on Zama's hosted co-processors, or if they're running on Shiba, or they're running on whatever, doesn't make a difference. So our main focus right now is on traditional finance and tokenization, and on application developers. We have enough good infrastructure. We don't need more FHE L1, L2s. We have that already sorted. We need more applications, and we need more big use cases outside of Web3.
And very clear. But are you not afraid about some competitors? And by the way, what kind of competitors do you have, in your field regarding that? Because, for example, there is a player like it's not the same product as you, but there is, for example, there is Chainlink, very close to very big financial institutions, like very traditional and big, to enter in the DeFi and to have a mix between private blockchain and public blockchain. So what kind of competitor do you have currently, and where is the competition around Zama?
So our competition, you can think of it on two axes. We've got FHE companies, and then we've got blockchain companies trying to solve those use cases, right? On the FHE side, we have a bunch of other people trying to build FHE solutions, but they're either not building for blockchain, or they're so far behind that by the time they can catch up, if they can ever catch up, we'll be too big in the market, right? So I'm not too worried about other FHE companies. In terms of things like tokenization of assets or confidential smart contracts, there are other solutions that exist, but none of them gives you this on-chain composability on encrypted states that FHE is uniquely offering. And I think that advantage is huge when you think about it, because any Solidity developer in one of those institutions can already start building their confidential contracts without having to learn something new. So, if you look at most of the infrastructure provider for, tokenization, I see them as partners, not as competitors.
Okay.
Right?
That's okay.
And actually, we work with a few of them as well. So.
Okay. For you, what's the horizon of time regarding the mass adoption? Regarding, I would say, in crypto in general, to have a mix between private blockchain or only public blockchain. I don't know. I'll let you answer to this.
So I'll give you our timeline and how I think about this. 2025 is when FHE goes into production in hopefully a bull market, right, with pretty wide adoption. So I'm hoping that the FHE ecosystem will be 100 times bigger by the end of 2025, 2026 than it is today, right? But really, this is just the beginning, because blockchain and finance are entry points into building a broader set of use cases on chain. If you think about it, if you can run money on chain, if you can start having governance on chain, with your votes being encrypted, if your identity is encrypted on chain, it's really starting to look like the building blocks of a country, right? So what I think is going to happen is we're going to start building more and more of those state infrastructures on chain with FHE, identity, currency, finance, voting, healthcare, your company registry, your HR payroll, your taxes. We can do all of that on chain with FHE now. So if you take this thing globally, you can start to think of it as as a state operating system on chain powered by FHE. And it turns out that there's a number of people right now building new states, whether there are network states like Prospera or existing countries like Argentina trying to basically reinvent their infrastructure. There is a rare opportunity to make all of these things run completely on chain, right? So I think for me, after finance, I think there's a generalization of using blockchain for all kinds of state services.
Okay.
And once you get to that, the next step is using FHE for all of the internet services you're using, machine learning, cloud computing. And that's really kind of like the long-term vision is we start with blockchain, we expand into, I would say, network state and state services on chain, and eventually all the internet's encrypted end-to-end.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. So you are just describing the fact that there will be a layer on top of the traditional internet, and
Yeah,
we're gonna
exactly.
use in any ways the blockchain through the blockchain. Or for example, a transaction will be just a simple action on the overall internet, as you described.
With or without a blockchain eventually, right? I think it's just that blockchains are a great use case for FHE today because everything on a blockchain is currently public. So we're bridging that gap, right?
Okay.
But I'm thinking beyond that, right? Really long term, beyond blockchain applications, I'm really thinking about, just like using ChatGPT encrypted end-to-end, for example. And we could do that today, but in terms of, I would say, scalability and performance, we still have a bit of work to do for ChatGPT to be encrypted end-to-end, but we'll get there eventually. And I think, that's a really exciting vision because if everything you do online is encrypted end-to-end, whether it's a blockchain, whether it's a government service, whether it's a machine learning, AI chatbot, if everything is encrypted end-to-end, then privacy is no longer an issue, not because you don't care, but because it's guaranteed by design in the protocols.
Okay.
Right? And that's really what we want to do, right? I believe that people shouldn't care about privacy, but they shouldn't care because it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay. I see. Just for finish this podcast, you talk about AI a lot sometimes in this interview. Regarding, you talk about ChatGPT, for example. Where your technology is standing regarding AI and why we need privacy in AI.
So we need privacy in AI because otherwise you're just giving away all of your data to the companies operating those services. Right? And you could argue, okay, it's fine. I trust Google. They have my data anyway, right? Fine. But if you want to use AI on a blockchain, you can't do that, right?
Yeah.
You need to encrypt the inputs. Otherwise, literally the whole world can see your data, not just Google. So I think, privacy in AI in cloud is good for reducing the risk of data breach and all these things. Privacy in AI is necessary for AI on chain. But if you think about it more broadly, I mean, AI is my background, right? I mean, I've been in AI since 2003, in crypto since 2013. So it took me 10 years to, I guess it didn't exist before 2009 anyway, but you get the idea. What I think is very obvious is that the same way people are demanding confidentiality in blockchain applications, people are going to require and demand for confidentiality in AI applications. There's just too much at stake not to do it. It's just going to take us longer to get there because just of the complexity of running AI models versus smart contracts.
Okay. Thank you, Rand Indy, CEO of Zama. So I remind the audience that Zama is a company specialized on the design of privacy solution, not only blockchain, mostly of course on blockchain, but not only. Thank you to have been in this podcast, Rand. I wish you good luck for your roadmap, and if you want to add something before the end, that's time, or if not, that's time to finish.
Well, thank you for having me. This was great. For someone who works in privacy, I'm actually surprisingly visible and easy to find.
Okay.
So if you want to talk about that, if you want to build an application, if you want to use FHE or anything, you can find me on X at RAND and on Telegram at RAND. It's that simple.
So to my understanding, you are like hiring people in your ecosystem. in the Zama
We're
ecosystem?
always hiring, of course, but I think today what we want are people to build in FHE.
Okay. I remind the audience that we're going to dedicate a special analysis this week on the theme of privacy. So stay tuned in the Big Well, read the Big Well, and subscribe in the Big Well very soon. I'm very pleased to have you in our ecosystem. Thank you, Rand, for this interview, and have a good day and good luck once again for your roadmap. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.